Imagine this. You're an Asian actor trying to find work in the hot hills of Hollywood, California. A new film is being produced that features an Asian character. You fit the requirements and audition for the role. After questionably careful consideration, the director chooses Katharine Hepburn for the role. This is Katharine Hepburn. She's white. Now, imagine this. What if I told you that this actually happened in 1944, and the movie's called Dragon Seed? This was a really easy scenario for Asians to imagine, as this happened in cinema more than you'd think. Like, way more. In the following few minutes, let's discuss Asian portrayals in American cinema and a theory termed Orientalism. In the earlier days of American cinema, prior to many social justice and civil rights movements that occurred in the mid-20th century, films often reflected the current state of the country. This meant that ideas such as racism, sexism, classism, and other isms snaked their way into film without question of their political correctness. Hollywood was predominantly whitewashed in both casting and production crew, and racism and Asian stereotyping was prevalent, even in animated films. Poor depictions of East Asians presented themselves in newspapers, political cartoons, and other medias during wartime. This was accepted as humor for this period, and the buck-toothed, slanted-eyed appearance was trademarked so quickly that these racist features carried on into cinema. In 1955, Walt Disney Studios released the film Lady and the Tramp. At one point in the film, the protagonist, Lady, encounters two evil cats, the Siamese twins. Though these characters are animals, they're personified in such a way that it is hard to deny their racial intent. The slanted eyes, buck teeth, and thick accents are wholly indicative of Asian coding and stereotyping. A few years later, the Aristocats created a similar caricature with this cat, seen playing the piano with chopsticks. Although both instances pertained more to personified animals, Hollywood was not shy in taking these stereotypes and turning them into live-action portrayals, using white cast members. The terms yellowface and Orientalism in cinema were coined when Hollywood had white actors portray Asian characters in an exaggerated manner. As mentioned earlier, Katharine Hepburn jumped into traditional East Asian attire, taped her eyelids back, and called it a day in Dragon Seed. We see a similar situation in the popular 1961 film Breakfast at Tiffany's as well. This is side character Mr. Yunioshi. He is a loud, clumsy immigrant neighbor who has very little significance and serves more as a prop. He bears stereotypical features such as buck teeth, small eyes, glasses for his poor eyesight, and a thick East Asian accent that is nearly indiscernible. This character is portrayed by a very much white Mickey Rooney. Yellowface in cinema has evolved and is not often practiced anymore due to its negative nature and stereotyping. It hasn't necessarily been eradicated, however, and white actors occasionally still take on roles intended for Asians. Asian casting did rise in Hollywood as filmmakers started to realize the weight of yellowface. Asian actors started to gain more popularity and took on new roles in the latter half of the 20th century. However, this wasn't exactly the ideal representation of Asians in cinema. There weren't caricatures like the ones seen in the Disney animations, but nonetheless, stereotypes and poor portrayals of Asian characters ascended. Asian actors were now almost typecast into roles that still milked a foreign, unwelcoming stereotype. Take Long Duck Dong, for example. Getty Watanabe was an Asian-American actor who portrayed Long Duck Dong, so at least they didn't have a white person suit up and mock an East Asian accent. Instead, film producers had an American actor of Japanese descent exaggerate the East Asian accent and play a Chinese character with a Vietnamese mocking name. In addition to this character, Hollywood further played into stereotyping Asian side characters by limiting them to either very strange and outlandish roles, to hypersexualized, fetishized roles to appease the male gaze. Asian actors tended to take on side roles in films as the quirky side character, submissive to a dominating force. Sometimes the only Asian member in a film was the villain or slapstick joker. Korean-American actor Ken Jeong's role in the Hangover film was to be the sleazy Chinese villain whose accent and self-inflicting racist jokes served the plot of the white main characters. It can be argued that the whiteness is the standard in cinema, according to Richard Dyer in his novel The Matter of Whiteness. There are characters, and then there are Asian characters. Although Asian actors in cinema have often been limited to poor portrayals and stereotypical roles, many films in recent years have attempted to combat these previous portrayals. Films such as Crazy Rich Asians from 2018 have had completely Asian casts take on less of a traditional slapstick role and more main character leadership type roles that don't involve negative stereotypes and exaggerated accents for the purpose of humor. In 2019, The Farewell was released and brought new light to Asian portrayals in cinema by presenting more cultural awareness. Animations such as Raya and the Last Dragon from 2021 have also made some attempts combating negative representations by having an entirely Asian cast and a narrative inspired by Southeast Asian culture. Asian characters in cinema have come a long way since the early days of film. Yellowface and Orientalism are less practiced in today's cinema, however progress is still being made in providing accurate representation of ethnicity and race in film.